Before we get into today's main topic, there have been a lot of things happening on reform councils that, well, they're not worth, shall we say, making a full video about, but I might actually start doing shorts about them in the future because some of them are just highlighting the fact that reform just have no idea how to run a local council. And if this is how they can't run a local council, what hope do they have for running a government? That's the terrifying thing, as we said before. But two things that, of course, happened recently, and it's typical reform councillor stuff. First of all, was I believe it was the fire and rescue committee. That is the committee involved in scrutinising and looking at your fire and rescue service going on in your in your county. Turns out the reform guy who was put in charge of it didn't actually turn up to the meeting. So, good one for scrutiny on that. Meanwhile, of course, I believe it was in Durham, the crematorium committee had its first meeting to a point where, again, reform basically did not turn up. Now, if you've ever been in a proper committee meeting, these are run to time. If you do not turn up or you do not say, oh, yeah, by the way, I am going to be late, the meeting will start without you regardless. But yet, that is apparently what reform seemed to think would happen, that if they weren't there, that the meeting would wait for them to, well, turn up. And of course, the meeting continued, to which they were voting on who was going to be and what in this committee. To which then, of course, reform finally, of course, turned up, only to then ask, can the meeting be restarted from the beginning? So that they could take part in the vote, to which the council's legal officers on that meeting turned around and said, actually, no, you can't do that because there are rules. You did not turn up on time. So guess what? The vote stands. Again, just reform people, something worth pointing out, they are not turning up to their jobs. They are not turning up to these meetings at all. Some of them, in relation to, like, the fire and rescue thing, probably quite important that they actually, turn up to that. The crematorium one, still quite important, but just goes to show you they aren't running things. They can't run things. They have no idea how to run things. Anyway, on to today's story, because as you all probably no doubt have heard over the weekend, Reform has lost another MP. They've gone, started at 4, then down to, then down to 3. No, sorry, they started at 5. Ross lost Rupert Lowe, so then down to 4. Then gained Sarah Pochin, so that was back to 5. And now they've lost another MP, James McMurdock. It's just like interesting, but it does look like that this particular McMurdock has been a very naughty boy in this case, because he's being investigated for his business propriety. Because it looks like he was involved in some COVID loan stuff. So, before we get more into the story, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there is the Pony Club YouTube membership down below as well. So, as always, let us crack on today onto today's main story. So, Reform MP James McMurdock resigns his whip pending now business propriety investigation. So let's find out what's been going on here. So, Reform MP James McMurdock has now given the party whip up the party whip while he's now being investigated over allegations of his business conduct during the coronavirus pandemic. Lee Anderson, the party's chief whip, made the announcement on Sunday, stating now it related to accusations in the Sunday Times over government loans he is alleged to have taken out during the COVID pandemic. The report claims that McMurdock took about £70,000 worth of loans out into 2020, which he said were from the government's bounce back scheme in 2020. In it, he says he borrowed £50,000 for one business, the Jam Financial Lid, which had no employees and negligible assets until the COVID pandemic. Then, strange that he's taking out a loan for a business that had no employees there. For a firm, of course, to be eligible for a loan, it would have now needed to report a turnover of at least £200,000. And in 2021, McMurdock is said now to have registered as a director for the company, transferring his shares to Yvonne Allen. Another company McMurdock owned, Gym Live Health and Fitness Limited, is said to have borrowed £20,000, so it would have required at least a turnover of £100,000 under the bounce back scheme. It, of course, too, had no employees, according now to the latest registered accounts available on Companies House, and of course, a nominal assets until the COVID pandemic. As a result, the companies were now due to be struck off the register of Companies House. Yet, on that very same day of February 2023, the process of suspending both companies was then halted after the regulator had an objection from a third party. McMurdock, of course, told the Sunday Times to be, quote, very, very careful when approached for a comment, and said it was a, quote, technical expert would, of course, be necessary to understand the issue. He repeatedly now refused to say why he took out the loans, the newspaper reported. Again, looks to me like not everything was on the up and up. If it was easily explainable, why isn't he telling people about, oh, this is just what happened? Seems to me that if you're being pretty silent about it, there's maybe more going on than meets the eye here. The report, of course, was then preempted by the announcement from Anderson, who then posted a statement on Twitter saying, I've now received a call from James McMurdock, who would have advised me as the chief whip. He has now removed the party whip from himself, pending the outcome of investigation into the allegations that are likely to be published by a national newspaper. The allegations relate to a business propriety during the pandemic and, of course, before he became an MP. After resigning from Reform UK and pending now an investigation, McMurdock said on a statement on Twitter that he, quote, asked for the whip to be suspended as a precautionary measure and for the protection of Reform UK. Referring now to a conversation with a journalist, the MP for South Basildon and East Thurrock went on to add, I've confirmed now to the journalist that all my business's dealings had always been carefully conducted fully within the law and in compliance with all regulations, and that now appropriately now qualified professionals had now reviewed all activity, confirming the same. Like I say, we'll see what happens in this investigation then. McMurdock, of course, was basically a politically unknown who won the Essex seat just by 98 votes, just last year's general election. Again, always worth pointing out, some of these Reform MPs that did win won very, very narrow margins indeed. He's, of course, subsequently, of course, admitted to having been convicted of assaulting his girlfriend at the age of 18. Reform said that he was, quote, someone who had, quote, got things wrong and learned from it and has now grown and succeeded. The news will, of course, be a blow to Farage, who recently, of course, lost Rupert Lowe, one of the party's 5 selected MPs in 2024. After the row since then, the party gained Sarah Pochin in a by-election. And, of course, they're back down an MP, at least for the time being. We'll see what the outcome of this investigation ends up being. But quite frankly, doesn't look good. This looks like the old, what is it, the Father Ted, the Ted Crilly excuse. The money was just resting in my account. You know, seems to be a little bit dodgy. And if he's supposedly got these experts that have confirmed that it's all, you know, up and legal, why hasn't he got one of them coming out and giving a statement backing him up and saying, well, actually, no, here's all the stuff, here's why it was all, you know, legal. But of course, we'll see how this investigation goes. So we'll see what happens. Will they be permanently losing another MP? So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, let me know what you think down below. And of course, we'll see you all next time.